Hello and welcome to another episode of Scions of the Southland. As always, my name is Akshay and joining me is a man who apparently has to catch a flight and is thus making our recording go fast today, Mr. Jake Grant. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing fine, thanks. And it's not so much me catching it, but catching somebody who just caught one. So it do be that way sometimes.
It indeed does. Well, given your haste, we do have a lot to talk about today, despite your haste. We had golf out in Hawaii. Women's tennis was in action in Stillwater this week. Men's tennis had a two match set. Had a lot of basketball. So how about we put our usual 30 minutes on the clock, and we also do have a softball preview to get to. So maybe we'll add, we'll go 40 minutes this time, just to be safe, and get right to it. What say you?
Yeah, let's ride.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Let's start with golf, who's out in Hawaii. I don't exactly remember the name of the invitational, but I do recall that they finished in and around 7th. I think, to paraphrase some things that you were saying earlier this week in our writers' room, the rumors of their demise have been greatly exaggerated.
Yeah. They even led out of the gate out on the Big Island. So that was nice. We saw some people step up. I don't know. We knew there was talent on this team. Obviously, there kind of always has been. It's just nice to see them clicking a little bit better, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Where are they headed next? I know they stayed in Hawaii to play another round at a golf course and get some practice time in for most of the squad, but I assume they're headed somewhere else this week.
They've had quite the couple weeks, being out in California and then immediately in Hawaii. What a life! But they're actually off for the next 12 or so days. They have a weekend off, and then they'll be out in California again. Wyoming's hosting something in California, so.
The wonderful world of COVID scheduled sports. It's my favorite.
I think it's a combo of that and Palm. What it's not. Yeah, Palm Springs. That's the California inland nice place to go play golf and stuff in the winter, right? I think it's Palm
Sure.
Springs.
I have
Yeah.
no idea.
All right. Let's go with that. But yeah, it's called the Desert Invitational, so it seems like it may have been at least somewhat more planned than I guess the 49ers moved to the desert.
Yeah, that was and still remains weird. I don't know. I got nothing else on that one.
Very fair.
All right, let's move on to arguably, I don't know, kind of the most exciting in a good way, performances of this week. Women's tennis. Now, I say that knowing that they lost 2 of the 3 matches this week, but it was exciting to see them playing like very meaningful tennis this early in the season. They started off the ITA tournament, the 8-team ITA tournament, with a loss to Pepperdine, and then they also lost to Ohio State yesterday before closing out the tournament with a win versus Oklahoma State today. But you have to keep in mind that these are all top-ranked teams in the nation, and they got a lot of good competition, and they didn't lose any of these matches until probably the last couple sets of the last couple singles matches. It wasn't like any of them were blowouts by any stretch.
Yeah, it's kind of like being dropped into the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament for basketball, but there are no underdogs. So I guess just the women's NCAA basketball tournament. But no, they had some great competition. Pepperdine was number 5. Yeah, number 5. Little tough there. I know the courts that it was coming down to. There was a couple issues with like sun, even though it was indoors and stuff like that. But especially Rosie Garcia Gross down on 6 played very well.
I mean, she came back. She was
point.
she.
Yeah.
I think she had almost gotten swept in the first set and then staged a massive comeback in the second set and kept herself in it in the third set to keep Tech's hopes alive, however slim they were at the end there, but to keep Tech's hopes alive in that match. I think at one point she had saved 9 match points in that.
She was on the 9th match point when she lost, but yeah, no, saving 8 match points is. I mean, that was stressful. Me watching through my computer from 1,000 miles away. I can't imagine, actually being on the court and having to execute. So good on her. It's, I don't know. It's weird to say a quality loss because I don't really believe in, that in the way they're usually talked about. But
this isn't the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, our week was essentially we lost to A&M, we lost to Bama, we beat Georgia, Florida football experience in terms of, quality losses and all that nonsense. But I think that either way, it's good to see, especially 5 and 6 and some of our younger players being once fed to step up. And they did it all without Ava Rostar. I know for sure she wasn't in the first 2 lineups. I didn't get to watch the match today. Maybe that's why they won. But yeah, notable loss. So they're not saying it's excusable or anything like that. But they played tight matches against good teams. Can't really fault them for that.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain about it. I think they put together really good performances, but it still sort of shows the development, and there's still a bit of a talent differential, right, between Tech and some of these higher level teams. I mean,
oh yeah,
Pepperdine. I'm going to say that make the same mistake as you. Pepperdine had the #1 singles player in the nation, but that comes with the caveat that she actually sat out this match for some sort of undisclosed injury concern.
Yeah.
So but I think that speaks to the available talent that Pepperdine. I'm going to mess this up because of you. It speaks to the level of talent that they have over there in California, and Ohio State and in Oklahoma State. But Tech was still able to keep pace with that. And I think that bodes well moving forward.
Yeah, and throwing it back to the year after we went to the Final Four, we kind of made a somewhat miracle run at the NCAA tournament. And in the first round, we upset a number 25 Ohio State team. So it's very interesting to see how the two teams, and not even diverged, but have just crossed paths again.
Parallel? I don't know.
I think the last point I want to make is, there's a talent disparity, but there's also an age disparity. And I think
that's another thing that I wanted to touch on.
On top of the, you played, this was 2 weeks ago now, but you played an emotional tight game against South Carolina to play Duke, which was an emotional tight game. And then you go to Pepperdine and you play them 4-2 or whatever the final was. 4-3, which was not a crushing blow, but man, these are quite riveting matches, and it's not there hasn't been an easy win for them in the whole ITAs. So just the fact that they have 3-2, they've played a handful of top 10 teams, let alone top 25. They've earned their salt, I think, and that's what I got.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the other side of the tennis courts with the men. They took a loss to Athens earlier this week. I think I haven't checked Twitter recently, but I think they were still working through doubles versus South Carolina. I know when we were talking about this with Ethan a couple of days ago, we were sort of pleased with how they kept pace. Versus, a pretty good or very good Athens tennis team. But how are they doing today? Where do you think they sort of sit in terms of their expectations for the rest of the season?
Actually, I've got a question for you. Where do you think I just was? Why do you think we started this late?
This is me teeing you up properly.
I
and
was going to
you
say,
clearly failed this test.
I stayed after women's basketball. I hung around because they were letting students in outside at men's tennis. We lost the doubles point, played them sort of close, probably could have been a little bit closer. Didn't see any of that, but I did stay for singles. I think the man of the match for the Jackets was Marcus McDaniel. He scored Tech's single sole point. We lost 4-1. They called it suspended play, I think, with trailing 1-0, but up in games on 6, and I think the other was down after winning the first set. So not quite as close as the UGA match, which is disappointing, I'd say. But I don't know. Marcus McDaniel looked really good. It was a 2-set loss for Keshav Chopra, but that was about as not emotional, but fired up and tightly contested 2-set losses you can take. So don't really fault him there either. Bit of a beatdown on one for Anders Martin, but the rest of that, I'd like to see us win doubles points. That we have 2 ranked doubles teams out of 3. I think that's where we could stand to make a lot of our money this year. Not saying that as Tech doubles goes, so goes Tech tennis. I think that's a general thing for a tennis match in general. That's why it's the coin flip, like, deciding point, I guess. But we're still a young team. I don't think we lose anybody off of this team, quite frankly. And most of them didn't have anywhere close to a full season last year. So I don't know. Just seeing Marcus step up was really good. I think he and Anders Martin are a good pairing on 1 and 2. Keshav Chopra has grown a lot. I think he has a lot of potential this year as well. So again, we'll just have to see how it shakes out as ACC play starts to trickle in here soon.
Yeah, I think we talked last week about sort of different expectations or different sort of windows of opportunity, right, for both the women's team and the men's team, and also the same conversation with men's and women's basketball. And I think so putting these 2 occurrences back to back, right, or these 2 events back to back, where we're talking about the women in the taking some quality losses against really good teams in the ITAs, and then the men sort of keeping pace but struggling versus similar quality teams on their side. It sort of goes to show sort of our expectations, our mindset for each of these teams, right? Like, the men's team may not lose anyone next year, but they're still a somewhat older team, right? Whereas the women still have a lot of room for that experience and that growth. So it'll be interesting to see how those 2 teams develop over it's still early in this season. So it'll be interesting to see how they develop the rest of the way this year, and then also heading into next year and the year after that.
Yeah. They have a lot of runway, and I think the allusion to last week's chat about men's and women's basketball is fairly on point, and I think also relates to how we felt about them this week. So,
oh boy, you've teed me up perfectly. So, women's basketball, they did lose today, but they keep doing this thing where they really like testing fans' cardiac health, and I don't like it. I love this team.
Stars, dude. It was not good.
My blood pressure got a little testy. I think watching the Clemson game, which was the midweeker, that they squeaked out in the last like minute and a half max. They couldn't. They were in position to do the same thing today, but they couldn't quite pull it out. And then the third game that actually started their week was Syracuse, in which they were able to pull away pretty comfortably. But it's been a week, and it's been quite a week for Georgia Tech sports fans' cardiac health, especially in the basketball department.
Yeah, I mean, between women's tennis and these 2 teams, it was a lot. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, today. I say this every time I have to complain about reffing, but I hate complaining about refs. And Yeah, sure. Clemson has known floppers, whatever. I didn't watch that game in person. I was listening onto the radio, so I can't really complain about that. I just know based on based on how we haven't really talked about this, but Rec Radio has a rather green color commentator, and she was very fed up, and I fed off that energy in a.
She's great. Like I think
She
she's a little
cares.
nervous.
Oh, she
Like,
cares. I
but
like that.
she is a super fan, and she like I think I appreciate her perspective. She's basketball knowledgeable, but also like a diehard fan, and it's great to listen to
Yes.
her.
Oh, clearly very passionate, and that's what was getting me animated. Because usually the radio, it has to be like
You have to at least
If it's
maintain some
Andy
sort
or
of like
Wiley, I will get fired up. If it's Pat Hughes on the Chicago radio, Pat Foley. But like, man, I've never been that jazzed about listening to women's basketball on the radio. But then we go around from that into today's game, and the refs didn't call anything the first three quarters, and then Tech had to go play 8-on-5 in the fourth quarter.
but at the same time, and I think I said this to you earlier, like it doesn't excuse the fact that they in the second half they hadn't been shooting all that well. I think there's that, and then and I think you have a point when you look at the breakdown, like our color commentator Fred was pointing out late in that fourth quarter that Wake Forest had scored 13 of their 20 points in the fourth quarter off of free throws. I
Yep.
think you have a point with that, but at the same time, like you said, it sucks to say that reffing is the root cause of not winning a game when you also were not shooting well late in that game.
Yeah, and I think I noticed this sitting there that I thought our rotation was really weird today. We had some great success in the first quarter, to an extent, the first half, with having our big aggressive forwards in the lineup. Say that as you will. We didn't really see a lot of them. We saw more number 15, Ms. Carter, out there. And she played pretty well. I like the aggression, but the height difference, I think, was really, really something. I don't really know what's up with that. Obviously, we're missing Bates out of the rotation. We didn't see as much Loyal McQueen. I don't think she scored until late in the fourth. But yeah, no, it was just weird.
But that's something
a
else I
matter of
wanted to
rest
talk.
too, though. Like, if you can't play Lorela Kubaya and Nerea Hermosa 40 minutes, uh, 3 times in less than a week, that's just brutal.
That's another thing that I want to talk about, both in relation to men's and women's basketball. This week has been like the definition of fixture congestion, right? And squad rotation on both ends. But you can't do a good job of squad rotation when you're in the position that both the men's and women's teams are, with their shorter rotations and their lack of depth.
Yeah. But see,
and it's difficult when you have
this was going to be a problem with women's basketball all along. That from the opening press conference, we knew, because of opt-outs, because of injuries, because of freshmen.
And I mean, we knew it was going to be a problem with men's too. It's just that the way that the ACC scheduled the last 2 or 3 weeks for both sides of the bracket here has been brutal, like uncharacteristically brutal. And we can sort of start talking about the men too. They're about to start playing a 5-game set in 11 days, which is similar to the 3-game set in 6 days that the women just played. It's a little ridiculous. Like, what are we doing here?
Even if you don't catch COVID, having to play that much basketball in that many different places, you are going to get sick just from being fatigued. Like I already, my heart goes out to Moses Wright in about 12 days, because he is going to be so gassed. And the same thing goes for, all the regulars: Mike DeVoe, Jose Alvarado.
Jose Alvarado is going to try to play 40 minutes in each of these 5 games like he did last night. Like, these guys are just going to be exhausted by the time these stretches end.
It's such a bizarre change from the not doing anything for like 2+ straight weeks. And the thing is, they can't even practice during that time. So their conditioning is like a sine wave, this year. Like, it's just all over the place.
It's frustrating. I mean, like obviously all of these teams are going through this, right? Like they're all the teams in the ACC are facing these similar challenges. It's not just like Tech is getting screwed out of the gate. Like I'm sure other teams have had similar stretches, but it's just it's frustrating. I think when we talk about fixture congestion in regards to like let's say European soccer, because that's like the easiest place where I can make this case. It's, you have a 23 plus man roster that you can rotate through. When you're talking about um, Tech basketball and the way that both teams are playing or like to play, you have maximum eight people, that's men or women, and on those respective teams that are able to play, and it just does not work out. Like you can't really counterbalance. You have Lorella Kubai, you have Nerea Hermosa, who are probably going to be playing 40 minutes on 40-minute stints on the women's side, and then you have Jose Alvarado that's going to push to play 40 minutes, whether you want him to or not, in every single of these 5 games that are coming up. And it just makes me think like,
Well,
what are
see,
like, yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I was gonna say, like, but today that was part of the different dynamic. I think is that we didn't see 40 minutes of Hermosa and Kubai. Not that that's a problem, but like again, also without Sarah Bates on the floor, the perimeter defense by opposing teams just smothers Loda Milan. And to her credit, she still had 22 points today, which is quite the feat out of I think they scored 53. Like that is not shaking a stick at that.
And she had a couple threes at the death there, where to try to put a fire back
Yeah.
in the team and start a comeback. To her credit,
And no, her doing the intentional foul, being her fifth to foul out, she got a standing ovation. Every little bit of that was deserved. She played very well today, and I would be remiss not to say that because I mean, I don't know what it is. It's a problem I saw with Moses Wright in Monday's game, definitely in the first half of Saturday's game, but also from the forwards in today's game. It's just like shots that normally go in for them just weren't, and especially with the men looking at the front end of a busy stretch, starting with a big game on Wednesday. It's you can just hope especially for the men, they have a lot less slack. The ladies losing today is not a deal breaker for their tournament hopes.
but the men have to start winning games and winning them soon.
Yes,
If not, if not, every game right now is a must win.
I mean,
I think you could
if you
argue
use the
that.
game as a quad one win and one of the few left on the schedule, you got to circle that.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe we still go on the road to Clemson this weekend. I think that'll be quad one if they're still in the top 75. I don't know if they're in the top 75 of net. I haven't checked because today's been a busy day, and so was yesterday. Um, but yeah, no, it's hard to believe that the Louisville game was this week. But yet at the same time, that is what pandemic sports have been. I think is wow. It's been 2 weeks and a quarter of the baseball season for MLB went by. It's really the only thing that's felt anywhere close to normal is the NFL, which I guess it's fitting that the Super Bowl is today. But I won't trigger you too bad with Mr. Tampa Bay over there.
Okay, we're gonna move. We're gonna move on. I will final piece because I didn't actually say it. Men's basketball beat Notre Dame 82-80 yesterday. That's the other result that we've been referring to as in terms of last night. They only won because a Notre Dame player forgot to look at the clock.
Hey, we were winning when that happened, so they won because they did all the other stuff.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it because man, was that some Kirby Smart time management skills right there.
I'm sad nobody faked a fourth down kick on that play, but Oh, well.
That's not really a thing in basketball, but I'll give it to you.
Fair enough. All right. What do we got next?
All right. All right. We are going to do a nice preview of the softball season. We got that starts on Friday with a game versus Boise State as part of. I think that's still being branded as the Buzz Classic. You're the one with the sports information know-how. I unfortunately am not. But I don't know. I think we've talked about this team sort of in fits and spurts the last couple of weeks as the season has gotten closer. So I think they deserve, their own dedicated preview section, personally.
Yeah, I definitely would say the same. They've got a almost normal length schedule. All the ACC tournament or all the ACC series are 4-game sets. Buzz Classic will kick off the season with a doubleheader against Boise State Friday, Radford Saturday. They get one game in against Georgia State on Sunday. So that's pretty decent. And then they go right into the ACC slate the next weekend. And
with a brutal visit with the brutal visit of FSU.
Yeah, the only other major grouping of non-con games is a Buzz Classic 2, as weird as that sounds, but they've got Miami of Ohio, Kennesaw State, and then one against hosting UGA at the end of February. So, and then I think a random midweeker against Troy. But going right off from 5, okay, they should go 4-1, 5-0 in there, to the best team in the conference. At least it's at home. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And we'll get to that. I have some preview items to talk about with those. But let's start about talking about 2020 and 2019, the bit of the year that 2020 was, and all of the year that 2019 was. I think the records in both years were fairly similar, and the ability that they put forward in both years was fairly similar. 2020, they were 12-11. They started off with that series versus Washington that was at home as part of the Buzz Classic. And they'd sort of started trending up towards the end of the season before, all of the cancellations and everything kind of falling apart across the world. And then in 2019, they went 31-27, ending with a loss to, FSU in the ACC quarterfinals. So when you take stock of those years, and especially the little bit of 2020 that we saw, what do you make of that?
As close as we came to beating Washington in the Buzz Classic that first weekend, I had them penciled in my mind as both L's. So I kind of consider us 12-9 in terms of all right, reset, we're not playing the number one team in the country. And you're right. They did trend up, but I think 2020 in the games we saw reminded me of 2019 in that I was looking for a bigger step up 2018 to 2019 than I saw. And then I was looking for a step up from 19 to 20, but it felt like a lot of the same. But I think there's an important caveat there, right? They have their stats up because, as much as you said, I'm the sports information guy. Homie who's writing about the non-rep sports can't catch a media guide for half the sports. It would be nice. And make my life
quit your complaining.
So much easier, Akshay. But I think after we settled in with Blake Nelman kind of being the, not surprise, because she came in as a very touted freshman and pitched well the whole season, but she started 9 games with 14 appearances. As she started to take the brunt of that, she was 9-1 in those games with a 1.45 ERA.
She was good. Good.
10 games is still a relatively small sample size, but I think the numbers really speak for themselves. The 21 walks to 77 strikeouts, only gave up 2 home runs, no triples. that's pretty darn good across 219 at bats. The what was I going to say? That her average against was a 160. Her Madison McPherson out of the pen in the few appearances she had some similar numbers. A better rate on hits against, if that makes sense. But then again, a lot less stuff to go off of. I think that's a good place to start building your staff from. The ERA overall was a 332, and besting that of our opponents, who were at 376. We've had a fairly high 4s and 5s ERA for quite some time, and I think if we're going to look for a place where Tech has traditionally, I think it's been weaker on Eileen Morales' teams. If that pitching can match like the hitting we saw, especially late 2019, end of season 2018, I think that this could be a very solid team in this conference.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And we keep talking about it, we keep referring to it, right? That just blob of meh right after FSU and even maybe Louisville in the conference, where it just has not sorted itself out historically. It's always in flux. It's very ACC coastal chaos. So Tech putting together its pitching staff and continuing its elite hitting, because it is very good, would be a big step in cementing itself as that second tier team right there.
Yeah, I think a lot of this also is can be built off of good pitcher catcher relationships too. You see it a lot in big league baseball and college baseball. I think another year with Emma Koff behind the plate, and then getting her she's still on the roster as a freshman, potentially another 3 years. I think just having her working with the staff and just having that consistency is going to be great for them. It's a lot like, I guess, women's basketball this year, men's basketball this year. But I look back and I compare ACC volleyball to ACC softball. I think that is a totally valid comparison, in that in volleyball, you had or have, or who knows, Georgia Tech might be the best team in the conference there now. But for the longest time, you had Pitt at the top, and they were a top 5 team, not really a question about it. Smoke in the ACC, and then a bunch of giant question marks. Notre Dame's pretty good. Louisville's pretty good. Florida State's pretty good. UNC.
It's the blob. It's the blob of mediocrity that's right under the one team. That's the same thing in football.
Yep. It's so go ACC of them, but that's where there's potential, right? That's why you can be a Clemson, being in your first full year of having a softball program, and have a somewhat legitimate shot at like a ranking in the year, which, I mean, it's nothing like expansion in a typical context. Like, I guess you're a spoiled Atlanta United fan. Like, you guys came with a dynasty juggernaut of a team, when probably a good contributing reason to why the Thrashers aren't here, and a more accurate way to describe an expansion team is not that good out of the gates. But what Clemson is doing, what Duke's doing, is capitalizing on this soft middle part of the ACC. I'm not saying everybody's Pitt. Pitt's been notoriously bad in ACC softball the last few years. But I'm not saying everybody's Florida State. It's just, anybody can win any game. Who's going to get the most of them,
Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of dovetails nicely into who is going to help Tech win most of those games. I know you pointed out Nelliman and went through some of her strengths, but let me toss out a couple names myself. I think Brianna Roper also contributes heavily to that conversation, as she has for the last couple of years, right? I mean, she's had really good defense, and then also has been ACC leading at the plate for both of her, I think all 3 or all 4 of her seasons on the flats. So how does she continue that consistency? How does she, find that same sort of always dependable, always reliable form that, say, Tristan English from the 2018-2019 baseball teams had? How does that continue moving forward? And I think the way that she goes and the way that her hitting goes correlates highly with the way that Georgia Tech as a team performs this year.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty bold, not bold statement. I think that's a pretty fair statement. I think she's somebody we've expected to fill that role in the past. Another person in that same realm that isn't on our hit sheet that I would like to toss in for that, offensive consistency, fire starter type role. Cameron Stanford
Mm-hmm.
has more power too. And speaking of more power, Trisha Awald, who literally did not drop a single put out at first base last year, and I'm pretty sure she was at 99% at least the year before. That is that consistency in the field, fantastic. They had a couple either run and gun or put out like design plays that I saw them bust out. I think that was 2019. It's all running together. Last year, be it
Last
baseball
year
or
kind of just
softball,
didn't
it's just so hard
exist.
to track. But no, he's been locking it down ever since she transferred in at first base. Between the three of them, that is the core of a pretty great lineup. But you have a very familiar, quite frankly, roster. Like I don't know. Like there's probably opportunities for these freshmen, especially in pitching, to get into the mix. But I'm just looking at who they still have. It's a lot of familiar faces: Zeitler, Barfield, Dickerson, Bruce, Nelliman, Stanford. I'm trying to make this quick. Huckabee, Lexi Ray, Brianna Roper,
I mean,
Awald,
I don't know.
Cross.
It just, to
Like,
me, it sounds like you're just reading names off of the roster sheet now, and just going to keep going until you run out.
oh, I did run out. I was just saying those are all those are all people that we got at least a decent dose of last year, enough to say that like, all
The year
right, like,
before too.
yeah. I mean, not so much Koff and Nelman considering they were still in high school, but like this is a team. They've got some good parts. Let's see. I'm excited to see them out of the gate. I think I alluded to this earlier, but 4-1, 5-0 potential first weekend would be a great way to start. And then you have Florida State and Clemson, 6 games in I think 4 days. The weekend after that, so oof.
Yeah, I think so. Moving on to talking about those opponents, I think Clemson is a good benchmark. We talked about Clemson last week or the week before as being a benchmark team that Tech wants to compete against. But also in the terms of this season, I think two good benchmarks are how you do versus NC State and at the beginning of the season, right after that Clemson series, and then after I think the Buzz Classic 2 that you mentioned. And then at the end of the series, the second to last ACC series in Virginia Tech. Those are two similar teams in that banner of meh that we keep talking about. How do you perform against both of those, and especially closer to the end of the season? How have you grown over the course of the season into your roster, into your lineup, into your pitching staff, and how has that developed? Those are the things those are important games to me in that regard.
Yeah, especially with Virginia Tech being a not surprising, but a solid team. I
I
think.
know you had mentioned that they were fringe top 25 material.
Yeah, let's see if we can find a poll. Softball top 25. I honestly haven't looked all week. But
We are
I'd
good
want to give
podcasters,
people
right? We're
their correct
totally
number. Yeah, no,
prepared.
it's not even fringy. They were 21-4 last year, and they're ranked 15th in the opening poll. So there you go.
Alrighty then. So yeah, so NC State and Virginia Tech, put those on your calendars and let's make some measuring sticks there.
I mean, if we're talking measuring sticks, Duke, who has one completed season under their belt, went 23-4 last year and is ranked 25th. Clemson, who has maybe 20, 25 total games to their name, is receiving 9 votes in the poll. Just bonkers. But we'll
It's a
see
good
all of this.
conference.
So
It's a good softball conference. What can you say?
Duke and Clemson pouring their basketball and football money into the next domain, I guess.
Yeah, seemingly. So I think that kind of dovetails. I'm trying to make my transitions very good, as like a good podcaster would do. I think that kind of leads right into our conversation about what the expectations for this team are this season. Like, that you have that now, like a larger upper block of teams that are starting out the season ranked, including FSU, including Louisville, including Virginia Tech, Duke, Clemson.
Yep.
So, given those constraints and given that competition, what are we looking for this partially revamped Georgia Tech team to do in
Um,
2021?
I want to see them be above 500 in conference and better than that overall. Picking up these, there's not a lot of non-con games, but Miami of Ohio, Kennesaw, Georgia State, Radford. That's where you need to, you know, pick up some dubs. But yeah, no, better than 500 in conference. Like we said, there are opportunities for good wins and there are opportunities for wins, and we need to see growth. This is a team that is primed for it. So
Yeah, I mean, you also want to see the two. You want to see that stalwart batting still come into play, right? Like we've been talking about the entire time. I said it earlier. I think if Tech can hit consistently and hit consistently well, especially with Roper, especially with Koff, that bodes well moving forward. And then, as we've been talking about in previous weeks, can they find another pitcher other than Nelliman? Can they develop another pitcher other than Nelliman? Can they have good relief pitching going into 2021? Again, like you said, that's not something that they've been super, super good at during the Morales era. Are those things that if they can bring that team ERA down, or even if they can bring it down to the 2.32 that you were looking at last year in 23 games,
yes.
That's a successful season in my opinion.
Yeah, over a full season, that would be great to see. It'd mark a big step from their last full season. So yeah, and yeah, we've been a strong batting team. So keeping that steady or going is important. My specific predictions actually tie into those. I think Nelliman is going to see an outsized role compared to what she saw last year. I don't know how exactly they're going to split the staff. That would be conjecture and irresponsible for me to say, but I think she will start definitely her fair share of games, and they will use her hopefully effectively in that role. And I think AWOL will lead the way in slugging average, most of the major batting stats. She's been solid as a rock, and she can hit bombs, dinger derby, and of course putouts because she's a first baseman. Ha.
I do want to add some color to that statement. If you look at the stats from last year, it sort of gives us an idea of how they want to split the staff. You see Bruce with 9 starts and Nelliman with 9 starts out of the 23 total that were available. And then Ray also got the remaining 5. So I think that's sort of your three woman rotation, right? You have Nelliman probably plays the Sunday games. Ray or Bruce goes in the Saturday, and then the remaining one would go on Friday. So I'm interested to see how they, like you said, like how do they split it? How do they balance all of these good pitchers and give them time to shine and give them time to perform?
Yeah. I mean, we're going to need to see steps up from Bruce and Ray if they want to be a tournament team. I have been wary about throwing that word around because hope is a dangerous drug. But I mean, they've got Nelliman, great starting piece. We'll see if the rest can step up from that.
Mm-hmm. So let me hit you with my specific prediction. Tech will take 1 game each off of the home series versus FSU and Louisville.
Okay.
All right. So here's my thing. You know that weird stuff happens during baseball series. Like the very good team always drops the one weird one versus a team that is outmatched. So that's Tech in this case. And you saw it happen in baseball in that UCLA series a couple of years ago where Tech was able to win off of a walk-off in one of those cases in the third game. So I don't know. Why not David beats Goliath twice in this season? I don't know. It seems legit. I'm for it.
Yeah, I mean, if Nelliman could duel Washington into a 2-1 end of game scenario, I think that's definitely possible against both of these two teams. You also noted that you think Roper and Koff are going to combine for 30 home runs.
Yes.
Where did you get that one from?
All right. So this is pure conjecture, obviously, right? But you see that the way that they've been hitting, Koff especially came in on a hot streak last year. And we were really talking her up when we were doing these episodes at the beginning of last season. I think that if she's able to maintain that consistency and Roper comes back hot as well, we will see a lot of offensive firepower in general for the team. And also we'll be hitting a lot of dingers. It's not a science. We're just fans.
I think if I was going to pick two, I'd go Koff and maybe Awald or Huckabee. But I don't think that's unreasonable to ask for a combo, especially if they're on fuego. But yeah.
Fair enough. I think that about wraps it up for our softball preview. I know you have to go, but is there anything else that you want to cover before we jet on out of here?
ACC Network Extra. If you want to watch these ladies, if tennis is more your game and it's a home match, that's George Burdell on YouTube for live streams.
Oh no, you've exposed them.
I mean, it's eating my time. It might as well eat theirs too. Otherwise, women's basketball, men's basketball, baseball, the usual suspects. Women's basketball and baseball over the radio, WREK.
Atlanta.
In Atlanta. Don't tune in any other time because you'll get weirded out. At least that's what happens to me. I'm sorry. Love you, WREK. I mean that with all love. But yeah, no. Other than that, have a great week, guys.
All right. Thank you all for listening, listeners out there, and we will see you real soon.